I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Diablillo.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
You know you're eating a bug, right? Like, you know that's a bug. It's a wet bug. It's a bug that's been wet its whole life, but that is a bug. That's basically an arachnid. You like eating a cooked spider? No, thank you. I'm all right.
No, I agree. My dad made this joke a long time ago where he was like, I can't remember where. I think we were like at a restaurant and there's the tank of lobsters, and he goes, "Man, the first people that ate lobsters must have been desperate."
Oh, true. Because that thing looks poisonous.
It looks terrifying.
Like, there's no way.
So gnarly. There's no way somebody pulled that thing out of the ocean and went, this is going to be good.
Yeah. It had to have been like seeing like an otter or something eat one and be like, well, I guess if he can eat it, like. I
know. But it should shift our perspective on eating things like bugs, but I'm still just not there. I can't.
No, I think if I found out that I have ever eaten a bug, which I'm sure undoubtedly at some point in my life I have just through random chance, I would kill myself. I can't even think about the concept of it.
I mean, I know but many cultures around the world eat bugs, and it's just a very common thing. You go to like most Asian countries.
Crickets have, yes.
And there's like roasting tarantulas. That I would genuinely probably take a death sentence over.
In Venezuela,
they
do that too, yeah. Well, very rarely, but like it is known to happen. I think if I had ever found out that is what I was served, I would drown myself in the nearest bathroom.
No, I'd be free. I don't even know how I would react. I would be so beside myself.
That would be the worst day of my life.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, hanging out here with Akiva Miola.
What's up, y'all?
And we're about to get going onto a fresh new series, but I'm having a feeling that some of y'all might be listening to us for the very, very first time. This is going to be coming out, this episode here, I think just about 4 days before a collaboration that we're doing with Mr. Max Miller from Tasting History. So I have a feeling that if some of y'all get into that episode and you go, hey, these guys are all right, you might take one step backwards and check out this first episode of our series that we're getting into. So hey, for any of our new listeners, welcome. We appreciate you being here, first of all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I guess, just a teeny little thing about us or whatever, if you are brand new to the show here, is we try to do deep dives on historical figures. Generally positive, at least more positive than negative for the most part. And it was kind of in direct opposition to something like true crime, where you're just sort of drowning in awfulness. We said, how about we don't drown in awfulness?
Exactly. Instead of 6 episodes on the Manson family, we do 6 episodes on somebody who might have possibly contributed to society in some way.
Right. Like, what did Tesla do for the world? Which was, we continue to get feedback. And I actually had one of my coworkers ping me last week and was like, dude, I started listening to your Tesla series. It's excellent. You and Akiva have great banter.
Yes. Good. And also for any of those new listeners, I'm sorry about the accent. I did it in the first episode and I just had to stick with it. I apologize.
I like it.
It was corny, dude. It was corny.
Yeah,
but
that's
whatever.
half the fun. Come on.
That is you're right. You're right. I don't let myself have enough fun with this, but
exactly. You got to have some fun. That's half the point here. So anyhow, for all of our potentially new listeners here, thanks for joining again. And I'm going to let you get going here because I really want to get into this new series here. It's been a long time.
Got lots to cover.
Our last series was on Mark Twain. That was 10 parts, and then we had an interview after that, and then an Office Hours episode after that. So it's technically been 12 episodes since we've started a new series. Actually, 13 if you count the Office Hours before Mark Twain too.
Oh, true, yeah.
So it's been a long time since we've gotten Akiva back onto the mic and recording. So I'll let you get going here, but just before I do, for anybody who's enjoying the show, or if you decide you like it and you want to support us, you can do so by going to our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. If you have any questions or comments or corrections or any of that kind of good stuff, you can also send us a quick email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. And then one other thing, what is it? Oh yeah, reviews. If any of y'all are feeling generous and you want to give us a nice little happy review somewhere on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, we would appreciate that too. It helps us kind of boost up our numbers and rankings.
Absolutely.
So with that, Akiva, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you probably already everybody know who we're going to be covering for this series, but I'm going to let you...
We'll start with a little flourishy intro.
have some fun.
All right. So this next character walks a bit off of the beaten path for me personally. With little exception so far, the characters I've been drawn to for most of my life weren't really the weeping poets like Percy Shelley or the gunslingers like Pancho Villa. They were visionaries. Whether I'm looking into the past to see Da Vinci unlock the secrets of the human body or sitting at home marveling at the AC power that flows through my home thanks to someone like Nikola Tesla, it's always been easier for me to validate the people who leave behind some grand contribution to society, one that's clear and apparent. Perhaps it's due to my own nature. I've been tinkering and building things since I was a little kid, and I've forever been drawn to the tinkerers and the builders. But our next subject, however, doesn't quite fit that mold. While she was known to write most of her life, she didn't pioneer new genres like Mary Shelley or Mark Twain. She was an artist like Da Vinci, but her skills are more in her soul than her mind. Where a Renaissance artist used their skills to depict realistic forms that told broad, sweeping stories about faith and humanity, our next subject used her pain and personal experiences to make art that is detached from reality, with subjects so abstract and intense, it can leave the viewer almost feeling uneasy. Nonetheless, she is one of the most important figures in Mexican art and history, and art across the world. Despite being embroidered on carteras to this day, our next subject was better known for her deeply fascinating life rather than her actual art while she was alive. While both feral and refined, her story was so profound it stands to outshine her actual work. Born in a world of bullet holes and bandits to parents from opposite worlds, our next subject would struggle to find herself while being married to a cultural titan of her generation whose very presence threatened to erase her from the history books. Their love life was straight out of a telenovela, with romance, betrayal, violence, and chaos on display for the whole world to see. From a young age, she would bind herself to the dream of equality for all, inviting none other than Leon Trotsky into her home during communism's still optimistic infancy. Devastated by what life would take from her, she would create some of the most influential art of the 20th century in a macabre symbiosis with her inner pain. We are, of course, talking about none other than Frida Kahlo.
The unibrow herself.
That's like what everybody knows, right?
I mean, we've talked about this as you were gearing up for this series. Dude, I feel like most of the people on my list for potential who I'm going to cover
people
in the future.
Oh, it's that pretty girl with the unibrow. And that's like all people know about Frida.
But I have like some sense, at least for the most part, for a lot of the characters, of like who they actually were. Dude, Frida is an anomaly for me. It's like I never saw the movie
Me too.
back in the day. I had no real... Again, for me, my frame of reference is that one Coco quote I've said already before, which I want to find somewhere in one of these episodes to insert that little soundbite. But then I also know, like, Mexican artist, unibrow. I think we're at the end of my knowledge when it comes to Frida. So I'm very excited to see what her life is like.
Yeah, she was kind of outside of my realm, too. Wasn't someone that I was going to pick... for myself. Like I said, typically I like the adventurers or the tinkerers or the inventors. But I actually discussed why we picked this one. Before we get into the sources for this series, I wanted to devote this series to my sister, Gabriela, who has been asking for me to cover this character since I first began writing for the show. Frida has become an icon and an inspiration for disabled women looking to express their joy and their pain, and I know that impact was felt by my sister as well. I love you, Gavi. I hope you like the series. This has been like one of my sister's heroes. My sister does art. My sister struggles with disabilities, and for a very specific group of people, Frida represents a lot, and I am not really part of that group of people at all. So, like you, her presence on Earth was not really known to me besides, like I said, pretty Mexican lady who painted and had a unibrow. That's all I really knew about her. But it's been really interesting doing this series because I keep trying to look for the things that I see in other biographies, in other stories that I've heard of other people's lives. But Frida is just so incredibly unique. It took me a long time to really pick up on her vibrations, so to speak, like pick up on her personality and what made her story particularly unique. And I think it's just because she was so genuine. She lived with a certain vivaciousness, and she was also unafraid to express her sorrow. You know, there wasn't ever this like coquettish, you know, analogy for her pain. She was like, "This is my body bleeding. I want you to look at it," which is jarring to at first to get into, but you'll kind of see as we get through this series why she's so frank with what she's experienced, right? Because it's really profound.
And you had said a word during your intro. It was like she's on castelas or something like that. What?
Carteras.
Okay, what is
Purses.
that? Purses. Okay, cool.
Yeah. You know, she's embroidered on all sorts of clothing. If you go to Mexico City to this day, you can find literally thousands of different objects with Frida Kahlo's likeness on it.
Gotcha. That if you continue to do that throughout the series, you're gonna have to say the English translation for, you know, white guy Daniel over here.
That's fair. Yeah, I only did it a couple times, so I will make sure to clarify. Now, as always, I want to mention the primary source for this season, which is an incredible help in piecing together Frida's life, a book aptly named Frida, a biography of Frida Kahlo by Hayden Herrera, published in 1983. Although the source is a bit older than I normally go for, Herrera seems to be the premier scholar of Frida Kahlo in the English language, setting the tone for many historians to come on how one should approach writing the biography of an artist. Pulling inspiration from Frida's journals and paintings, she uses her art to explain the mind state of Frida as she goes through her life. Along with the main biography, Herrera published a supporting book featuring Frida's collected works called Frida Kahlo, The Paintings. Most notably, she gave permission for her book to be made into a movie. It was a breakout role for Salma Hayek, and the movie Frida would be based directly on her book and would go on to make over $50 million at the box office. I really highly recommend this. There's some liberties taken, but honestly, the liberties would be like he said, she said sort of things, as opposed to like completely rewriting the story of her life. And it was a really great film. I think the guy who plays, I don't know what his name is, he plays Dr. Octopus in the original Spider-Man movies.
Oh man, I cannot remember.
He
his
plays Diego, her husband, and they have such a cool, they're just fantastic work. Really great.
I'm not going to watch it until this series is done. I don't want to taint anything.
That's a good idea. Now, that being said, I'm still going to be supplementing Herrera's writing with more contemporary information, seeing that the book is over 40 years old. But without further ado, let's begin. For all her life, Magdalena Frida Kahlo y Calderón would have told you that she was born on November 20th, 1910, the very day that the Mexican Revolution broke out. But in truth, she was born 3 years earlier on July 6, 1907 at 8:30 in the morning to parents raised in opposite worlds. Frida's father, Guillermo, was somewhat of an anomaly in the dusty streets of Coyoacán. Originally born with the name Wilhelm, his origins remain murky at best. While some scholars still debate his family tree, Guillermo was thought to have been from Hungarian Jewish descent. His father was a jeweler and an amateur photographer named Jacob Heinrich Kahlo, and his mother was named Henriette Kaufmann. Little Guillermo's family had moved to Germany when he was a child with very little of their own. But by the time Guillermo was in his teens, his parents had become wealthy enough to send him to study philosophy at the university in Nuremberg. Unfortunately, his career as a scholar ended abruptly when he sustained a brain injury in a devastating fall. Only months later, Guillermo's mother had passed, and while recovering, his father had married a new woman who he despised. As a way to give his son and wife new space, his father Jacob funded a trip for his son to visit Mexico. When Frida's father arrived, however, he changed his name from Wilhelm to Guillermo and vowed to never return. With nothing but the possessions he imported from Germany, Guillermo used his German connections to secure a job at La Perla, a jeweler's shop in Mexico City. His first marriage would provide him with 3 children, but after her passing, due to health complications, he turned to a coworker he admired, named Matilde Calderón. It's a bit puzzling as to why Matilde agreed to marry Guillermo at first. On one hand, Matilde was a Oaxacan woman through and through with a native family history and a deeply Mexican Catholic upbringing, while Guillermo was an atheist scholar from a country halfway across the planet. But there was more to this marriage than simple convenience. Matilde had a thing for German men. In fact, her very first lover was from there, although this ended tragically. Perhaps there was some kind of Freudian magnetism between Matilde and Guillermo, since her first German lover had killed himself in her presence. Aside from the psychological deep cuts, Guillermo was appealing for practical reasons. He was handsome, had a nice face, and a good Mexican-style mustache, and a promising new career as a photographer. Kind of weird, right?
Yeah,
Like
and so Matilde, that's Frida's mother.
Yeah,
And
Frida's
she's
mother,
always had a thing for German people. And so then she meets not Guillermo.
Guillermo. Yeah.
Quote,
Well,
unquote,
he goes
Guillermo.
yeah. He goes by Guillermo for the rest of his life, but his original name was Wilhelm.
Wilhelm, yeah. It's about as German as it gets.
Yeah.
No, that is crazy.
Yeah. And there was also like anti-German sentiment for a while during the time, because we're coming off the coattails of World War I. So Guillermo seemed to be the safe way to go these days. It was kind of a pros and cons being German in Mexico. On one hand, as we know from the Pancho Villa series, being European was kind of a plus, but being specifically German was a bit of a minus.
Well, but that's not true though, because this is before World War I.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. As things are starting to boil up.
Gotcha.
After leaving La Perla, the jewelry shop that they worked at, Guillermo Kahlo was a photographer by trade, with his own storefront in Coyoacan, but instead of taking portraits, he spent his time working for the government, taking pictures of new architectural marvels of Mexico. At the time, photos of cities, buildings, and sculptures were not only valuable for the government, but it was one of the only ways people could get a good look at a far-off city, and Guillermo was one of the best in the business. In fact, he had received a commission from one of the president's cabinet members to take photos of all sorts of government buildings, which allowed him to purchase Frida's first childhood home, a blue Mexican-style house with a central outdoor courtyard, affectionately named La Casa Azul. You can actually still visit La Casa Azul, and it's basically a museum to Frida Kahlo these days.
And that means the blue house, right? Mm-hmm. Because Azul is blue, right?
Yeah. For a time, the Kahlo family lived comfortably, better than any of their neighbors, but things would change when little Frida was only a toddler. It seemed that Guillermo's current client, Porfirio Diaz, would start to have a slight dip in popularity, known as the Mexican Revolution. Crazy. Anybody who listened to Pancho Villa's story would know this.
Porfirio Diaz, and I'm not sure if you're going to mention this. And I can't remember. Was it Porfirio Diaz that was the song La Cucaracha was based off of him, or was it? I want to say it was Porfirio.
I thought that was Carranza.
I'll have to double check it. We'll have to go
Hours.
back. It's now been a year since I did the Pancho Villa series, so
Yeah.
my facts are getting mixed up. But Porfirio Diaz, for anybody that listens to our Pancho series, was a hugely important figure in the Mexican Revolution.
Yeah. So we've covered the Mexican Revolution once before in our biography of Pancho Villa, the folk hero turned Mexican Genghis Khan that helped overthrow the Diaz government and his cronies. However, years later, a little girl would see the mighty battles of the Zapatistas through a different lens. One of Frida's earliest memories was of the revolution. Frida was just a toddler when Francisco Madero, the first democratically elected president in Mexico, would be assassinated by U.S.-backed forces of the old regime, starting what was called the 10 Tragic Days. Only a toddler at the time, a skirmish had broken out near Coyoacan, which Frida would recall, quote, "I witnessed with my own eyes Zapata's peasants battle against the Carrancistas. My situation was very clear. My mother opened the windows on Elende Street. She gave access to the Zapatistas, seeing to it that the wounded and hungry jumped from the windows of my house into the living room. She cured them and gave them thick tortillas, the only food that could be obtained in Coyoacan in those days." It makes sense that Frida chose to align her birth with that of Mexico's revolution, since the war would shape the lens that she viewed the world. Memorials and bullet holes would be the background of her youth. As a result of the war, her family of 8 would learn to adapt to the new world, whether they liked it or not. Yeah. It's kind of interesting, right? That we're kind of going off the coattails of a previous biography and seeing the after effects of... I mean, Zapata and Pancho were like, those were the guys, you know?
Yeah.
And this is the after effect of their decision making.
Yeah. And also, I did really quickly look it up. It was Victoriano Huerta that La Cucaracha was based off of. It was going to kill me if I didn't figure that one out.
Yeah.
No, but
yeah,
it is.
that's fair.
We've said this many, many times before on the show. The connection points that we discover between the characters that we do is half of the fun, in that you just start to see how the whole world worked together, and it was just
Yeah.
this weird sequence of, a spark happens here, and that lights a fuse that goes over here, that explodes over here, then that somebody sees
Yeah.
the explode, and it just
It's like
becomes
an
this,
event never actually ends.
No.
We just stop talking about it.
right.
You know?
It's this crazy domino effect, and it's awesome.
Yeah, because Frida would. I don't. As far as any of my reading so far goes, she would never meet any major revolutionaries herself. But obviously, they had incredible after effects on her life.
Right, and coming of age in this world that, especially in this part of the world, that was so directly influenced by Pancho Villa and the Mexican Revolution, it's pretty crazy. Where you can kind of see these little things going like, remove some of these little pieces, and would we have Frida? I don't know, right? Like it works in this really weird, amazing way. So
Yeah, and we get to talk about the politics a little bit later on. And like I said before, she would eventually meet Leon Trotsky, and you can start to make the connections how a post-Pancho and Zapata Mexico would lead to a really huge rise in like early communism there too, and like how those connections start to make sense. It's really interesting.
also this one, and we'll probably have to mention this again when we get there, but here's another one that's going to make you go, well, we got to take a drink. So Mabel Dodge Lujan, who, again, for new listeners, it was the first series we ever did, and she's connected to absolutely every single human we've basically covered so far. So Mabel, she went to the Mexican Revolution following a journalist by the name of John Reed. John Reed is, to my knowledge, the only non-Russian to be buried in the Kremlin Wall memorial, where like...
Wait, are you serious?
Correct. Where I want to say Trotsky is also buried because John Reed actually went over to Russia and fought in, I guess it would be the Russian Revolution in the 20s. So I would have to confirm this, but I'm fairly confident that John Reed actually knew Trotsky. John Reed knew Mabel, so by about 2 degrees of separation, Mabel
knew
Frida.
Trotsky and, and Frida and all of them. That's so weird, dude.
Oh, it's wild.
And for new listeners, the way that our series works is, one season, one of us does all of the writing and the other person just, chimes in whenever they find something interesting, and then we switch. So Daniel's knowledge of his biographies is much deeper than my knowledge of his biographies because he's the one who did all the writing. So it's cool when we get to trade information like that.
Yep, and vice versa. It was how when we went through Mark Twain, we talked about Tesla a good bit, and that was because of Akiva. So anyhow.
Yeah. So all in all, Frida had 5 siblings. 3 older half-sisters, Matita and Adriana, and 1 younger one named Cristina. Her father, Guillermo Kahlo, had 2 daughters, Maria Luisa and Margarita, from his first marriage before he married Matilde Calderon. If you remember, he had a previous marriage. Matilde, after the war, would start doing side jobs for money, and Guillermo's few clients became harder and harder to find. As a result, Frida's older sisters, Matita and Adriana, would take care of her, but her favorite sibling had to be her younger sister, Cristina. The older side of the family had been burdened with responsibility, but Cristina and Frida would get into all sorts of mischief together. Both of them would shoot silly glances at one another in church, making fun of their mother's devotion, and right as prayer began, the two would sneak out to a nearby orchard where they'd climb capulin trees, eating the cherry-like fruits till their little faces were stained with juice.
Cute. Also,
So, yeah.
Matita is a good name.
Matita is very cute, right?
It's very cute.
As she got to schooling age, a distracted family led her to become a bit of a troublemaker in class. She was known for beating up kids she didn't like and would play cruel pranks on her siblings. Described as, quote, the little imp, in one instance, she pushed her older sister, Maria Luisa, off of a chamber pot, soiling her clothing. This was when she was like 5.
Gross.
She'd do stuff like this all of the time, right? In another, Frida recalls choking a school bully till, quote, her tongue stuck out before getting pulled off of her by somebody else.
Jesus.
So she was just like kind of a little demon.
Yeah.
Right? This is like why I'm hesitant on having kids. While a devilish little Frida was able to see the humor in things, it seemed like most of the family didn't really agree with her. Her father's Germanic personality earned him the nickname Herr Kahlo when he came home, since he never smiled and had a tendency to lock himself in his study, reading or playing the piano alone. There was also considerable drama in the house. For instance, Frida's older sister, Matita, would run away from home without a trace. It took years to find out she was alive and well and married to a man in another town, but there was no joy in her discovery. After hearing the news that she was still alive, her mother refused to speak to her. This is very like, we don't talk about Bruno. If you've lived in a Hispanic household and some drama has happened, they're like, Matita? Matita who? I don't know who you're talking about. I don't have a daughter named Matita.
That's so sad.
Right?
I don't like that as a cultural thing.
I don't either, right? It takes work to break through that, right? Week after week, Matita would leave fruit baskets at the door, and it would take 12 years for her to be let inside as part of the family.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Talking about holding a grudge, dude.
Oh, yeah. Like nobody's business. That generation of like Latina mom, they could like they're like putting check marks on the wall like a prisoner of like days that I'm still mad at my daughter. You know? Yeah, and worst of all, when Frida was only 6 years old, she contracted polio. This was sort of a big hit for her. And nothing's really known about how she contracted it, but as a result, she began to lose muscle strength in her right leg. Day after day, her family would rub salve on it in the hopes that she would recover, but as a result, Frida would spend months of her early childhood sick at home. Despite the pain that little Frida was surely feeling, this is where we begin to see a spark of her imagination. Not as a painting, but as an imaginary friend. As her polio developed and she became isolated, Frida's mind became less and less concerned with reality. She wrote extensively on the experience in her diary later, quote, "On the glass window of what at the time was my room, which gave onto Allende Street, I breathed vapor onto the window panes. I let out a breath, and with a finger I drew a door. Full of great joy and urgency, I went out of it in my imagination through this door. I crossed the whole plain that I saw in front of me until I arrived at the dairy called Pinzon. I entered through the O of the Pinzon sign, and I went down in great haste into the interior of the earth, where my imaginary friend was always waiting for me. I do not remember her image or her color, but I do know that she was gay. She laughed a lot. Without sounds. She was agile, and she danced as if she weighed nothing at all. I followed her, and while she danced, I told her my secret problems. She knew everything about me. When I returned to the window, I entered through the same door drawn in the glass. When, for how long had I been with her, I do not know. It could have been a second or thousands of years. I blurred the door with my hand, and it disappeared. I ran with my secret and my joy. I cried out loud, surprised at being alone with my great happiness and with such vivid memories of the little girl." Cute, right? Do you ever have an imaginary friend?
No, because I am a grounded human being.
You're like, I wasn't a loser who got polio like Frida. I went outside.
No, thankfully I could use my legs.
Terrible,
that's so
dude.
mean.
That's terrible. I'm gonna clip that. You're gone, bro. You're
Canceled.
toast.
No, I will say though, as you were reading that quote, I was like, just like, I mean, it's all artists, but it's just like musicians. They take themselves so seriously sometimes. Mm-hmm. Where like I hear you reading this quote from Frida, and I go like, yeah, right. Come on, like it's a beautiful thought, but my immediate reaction of it is like, okay, come on, you. Let's be real.
I tend to agree, but to play devil's advocate, the artists who take themselves seriously like this are able to express themselves seriously as well.
You're right, and I'm being cynical. I'm probably wrong, but it is one of those that I'm like, that sounds like a great story that an adult would tell as an adult, to be like, I've always been this beautifully creative. And it's like, come on. You were like, did you draw a door on the window? Probably. Did you like go, oh man, I wish I could like go through that door and go like have fun? Sure. But did you disappear for potentially thousands of years as you danced with your happy friend who was always gay and knew everything about you? I'm like, I don't know. That feels like an evolutionary process. That took a couple of years to get to the point where you're like, it's got a name, it's my friend. Like,
Okay, and we're already learning something about Frida through this discussion, which is Frida did have a flair for the dramatic. Like, she was a storyteller. We just talked about it. She said that her birthday was the day of the Mexican Revolution, right? She I'm not sure if she was aware of it at the time, but she was creating sort of a lore about her. So when she told a childhood story, she wouldn't just say, oh, well, I had an imaginary friend. She's like, I had this imaginary friend that when I had polio really helped me, nurse through these issues. And I wasn't really able to go outside. So I got to express this other world, that sort of thing. So can we say practically that it was that vivid of a story? I don't know. I mean, there is a chance because when you're sick with polio for months and months on end as a child, things start to get a little kooky when you're in your room for 6 months.
Hey,
but
that's fair.
But you did point out a good point of Frida's character, right? She's a storyteller first.
And also, I have no leg to stand on because half of what Mark Twain wrote, we all know, was like highly exaggerated.
Yeah.
It was a weird blend of reality and complete fabrication.
Oh, totally. So, much like a sick Nikola Tesla fled into his imagination, Frida would escape with her little friend until she was finally able to recover and walk about in the real world. As she began to stand up on shaky legs, the family doctor recommended she partake in any exercise she could to help strengthen her short and atrophied right leg. In a move that was surprisingly progressive for Herr Kahlo, her father began enrolling her in any local sports club that would take her. For most little Mexican girls at the time, sports of any kind were seen as manly. But with her father's support, she played soccer, won medals in her local swim team, and even went round for round with the other boys in the boxing club.
Dang.
Yeah. She'd become a tomboy, like 100%, right? And after a year or two, she regained her strength, but her leg would never look quite right. And the kids would bully her relentlessly for it, calling her pata de palo, or peg leg.
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, right?
It's mean.
And she's like, well, I'll kick your ass. And that was...
Come on, bro, let's see you can swim faster.
For real. In an effort to hide it, she would wear 3 or 4 socks on the thinner calf along with a higher-heeled shoe to even herself out as she walked. But after polio and relentless bullying, Frida became somewhat of an introvert. Those formative years where kids ask each other to be best friends were spent inside with an imaginary one. And when she finally came out of her room, children made fun of her for being boyish and deformed, quote unquote. Shunned from her peers, Frida found friendship in the strangest place, her father. There was no denying that Guillermo Kahlo had issues. He was reclusive, aggravated, ponderous, and extremely anxious. Even in photos, you can kind of see a man who looks like he's never had an empty mind for a day in his life. The stress of his now failing business only made it that much more obvious. Luckily, his little girl seemed to have all of those same traits as well, so there was some camaraderie between them that was unusual for a father and daughter at the time. All of a sudden, Frida was helping out at her father's studio, sometimes even posing for his cameras. The family rarely came to his studio since it was in Mexico City, and even then, he hated visitors. But seeing how similar his little Frida was to himself, he let her into his world.
Cute.
Frida must have been awed by the look of her father's studio. It was as if there was a portal to old Europe in Coyoacán. Oriental rugs, French-made chairs, and painted backdrops decorated his portrait section, while old German cameras were kept painstakingly pristine throughout the years.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really cool, right? So he's got all of this old stuff from Germany. And I wrote, puffing about the room was a model train that her father maintained as if it was the Orient Express. But most impressive of all was his bookshelf. In a small but powerful little library, Guillermo would hand Frida leather-bound tomes from the great German thinkers, teaching her not only his language, but the philosophical ideals of Schiller and Goethe. Frida absorbed these books like a sponge. Guillermo, a man with little hope these days, would pat a little preteen Frida on the shoulders, bragging, quote, "She is the most intelligent of my daughters, the most like me."
Bit of an ego on that guy.
Yeah, a little bit. His head's kind of big. Actually, if you look at a photo, his head is actually quite big.
She's the most like me, therefore, she is the most intelligent.
So Frida and her father didn't just have a love for reading in common, but also a shared history of illness. Years later, Frida writes, quote, "My childhood was marvelous because although my father was a sick man, he had vertigos every month and a half, he was an example to me of tenderness, of work, and above all, of understanding my problems." The quote-unquote vertigo that she was referring to is actually some form of epilepsy due to his head injury as a student in Nuremberg. Guillermo most often seemed to have them right before bed, and now that they were closer than ever, she cared for him as he did for her when she had polio. Quote, "Many times when he went walking with his camera on his shoulder and me by the hand, he would suddenly fall. I learned to help him during his attacks in the middle of the street. On one hand, I would make sure that he breathed alcohol or ether, and on the other, I watched so that his camera wouldn't be stolen." It's kind of sad.
It is.
But it's cute that these two are like, I don't know, there's a sense of camaraderie because both of them are struggling with some level of disability in their lives. And like maybe Guillermo isn't like the kindest father. And we'll see a little bit of that more in like episode 2 and 3. The two of them were kindred spirits. It's kind of cute.
It also, I know this is definitely not the case for everybody, but it feels like there is often a sense with people who have children that if you ever get into a deep conversation of like why, there is a weird sense of like, because I wanted a friend like me. Do you know what I mean? Right? There's a sense of being like, because I want to have, a friend that like knows
It's
me
hard
and
to be
I know
understood
them.
in this world.
Exactly.
You know?
And so I feel like there's got to be a little bit of that too, where he was like, oh, cool. Like one of my kids actually is just like me. I don't have to explain myself. They don't have to explain themselves. We just get it.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice.
And like, Guillermo was like definitely like less of a prankster and less of a little asshole as Frida was. But like the two of them, like Guillermo could probably like saw Frida, being up to no good and like rolled his eyes being like, yeah, okay.
It sounds like he was an asshole in a different kind of way.
Yes.
Yes.
Misunderstood,
Yeah.
It seems that through allowing his daughter into his little world, Guillermo had found the son he always wanted. As Frida sat in her father's study reading his books from the old world, let's zoom out and take a look at what's happening in Mexico at large and how it's going to shape her trajectory. Since Frida's childhood encounter with these Zapatista soldiers, a lot had changed. By the time Frida was 6 years old, Mexico had gone from Diez to Madero to Huerta to Carranza, and Pancho had led one of the largest armies ever formed on this side of the planet. I'd highly suggest our season on Pancho Villa's life if you want to learn more about this time. But suffice it to say, as she approaches her teenage years, 1920s Mexico is making its final shifts towards stability. The peasant generals of the past had their moment on the stage following the democratically elected president Álvaro Obregón, and while there would be more political turmoil to come, middle-class revolutionaries had put down their six-shooters in exchange for fountain pens and paintbrushes.
You keep saying these names, by the way. That's like my ears burn. Obregón.
Right?
I'm like, oh yeah, I remember him.
Like, I know that name.
I'm like, oh yeah.
It's funny too because when we were working with Max, like, there were so many times where like we were talking about Tesla, and it had been well over a year since I had read anything Tesla related, and a name would pop up, and I'm like, I know I should know that name, but I'm about 1,200 or 1,400 pages away from the last time I read anything about Tesla.
I know.
Yeah,
it's sad, but I continue to find that like I will forget a lot about the previous series that I've done because I have to make room in my brain for the new thing that I'm working on, and I have to like make that my focus.
Own show makes me feel conceited, but I like doing it because I'm like, I worked on this, all right?
I might eventually, but I have to edit the episodes when we're finished recording them, so I have to listen to them twice through anyways.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Now, previous to the revolution, Mexican officials seemed to live in a different world. Prior to 1910, most people were unable to access education, and if they did, it was sponsored by the church with a very limited curriculum. At the time, Mexico had a deeply Eurocentric government with a class known as científicos, which were European technocrats whispering in Porfirio Diaz's ear. Even Porfirio himself was known to powder his Mixtec native skin to better please his investors from abroad. Not sure if you knew that.
I
Yeah,
did not.
he would whiten himself.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Now that the people had spoken, however, young professors worked to create their own philosophy by Mexicans for Mexicans. Leaders like Antonio Caso and Samuel Ramos wanted to adapt Eurocentric academia to better fit the Mexican culture and spirit. With the help of Obregon's Minister of Public Education, Jose Vasconcelos, the government waged a war on illiteracy, while aiming to make Mexican education founded in, quote, our blood, our language, our people.
Cool.
Yeah, right? So thousands of schools were built in only a few years. Pancho was a big contributor to that. Libraries, playgrounds, and public pools were made in communities across the country, and rural towns were equipped with education that Pancho Villa once wished for so desperately.
And also, it's important to note, too, I don't know if they mention it in your readings, but that was not just childhood education, that was adult education as well.
Oh, really? Yeah. I know there's like university stuff that we get into later, but I didn't realize that adult education was a big part as well.
Yeah, they would essentially do like night school at a lot of churches and stuff too, because
Oh, that's cool.
Obviously, you're working all day in the fields and everything, whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
and so these really, let's for lack of a better term, peasants, right? Non-elites, the common folk, they had no opportunity to get themselves educated to begin with, because even for a long period of time, the kids were also going to work with their parents. So even they didn't get to go to school. So as that was changing, they were like, well, if we want to educate the nation, we also have to start not just with the children, but also with the adults. So they made adult education a thing too, which is really cool.
Huh. Yeah. I know like university expansion was super huge. That's amazing. Yeah. That's so cool. I love stuff like that, man.
I know.
So basically, like out of this movement came the most esteemed school in Mexico City, at least for kids, called La Escuela Nacional Preparatoria, or La Preparatoria for short. Despite the institution's rather stuffy name, La Preparatoria was anything but. Reborn out of the ideals of anti-fascist... That's a hard word to say. Reborn out of the ideals of anti-fascist philosophers, scientists, and literary scholars, the very soul of the school was based on the new ideals of Mexico. At the initial reformation of the Preparatoria, Antonio Caso, their premier philosophy scholar, told his students, quote, idealists, persist in the salvation of the Republic. Turn your eyes to the soil of Mexico, to our customs and our traditions, our hopes and our wishes, to what we are. So when La Preparatoria opened their doors to women for the first time in 1922, Frida Kahlo begged to go.
Cool.
Yeah.
Also, what happened to people with speeches, right? I feel like something happened in the past like 50 years that was like, yeah, no, people just don't give unbelievably great speeches anymore.
Yeah, it's almost as if some of our politicians these days just go up on a podium and rant for 30 minutes about...
I know, gosh, it's almost like it's just pulled straight out of their ass. But, you know, hey.
I don't know anything, yeah.
I can't personally think of any examples of that, but, you know, I feel like it happens. You know.
Her mother, Matilde, was quite against going to La Preparatoria, but now that Frida was her father's little mini-me, there was no helping it. The family pooled all of their funds towards her education, providing her with a new leather backpack, clothing, and fare for her to take the trolley there.
So
commuting.
Hey, real quick question as you get into this, just based off what you said, were they a fairly low-income family? Were they pretty... Because when I hear they have this like blue house and stuff, I'm like, that doesn't seem like a poverty-stricken family.
Wealthy in property, but not necessarily in income anymore. So if you remember, he was hired by Porfirio Diaz to take photos. He accumulated a fuck ton of money, was able to buy a house. They had like maids and stuff like that. And then resources after the war dwindled significantly. So I could not call them peasants, in fact, but I wouldn't call them necessarily like bourgeoisie either.
Maybe
you know,
like middle to lower middle class kind of a thing.
Upper middle. Let's say your parents bought a very nice house and then they paid the whole house off and then now they're making like middle class money.
Okay, fair enough.
Right? That's the way I would describe it.
Cool.
So Frida would commute over an hour to get to La Preparatoria, and she would find herself in a completely different world than little Coyoacán. The Preparatoria was located in the heart of Mexico City, where the old Aztec city Tenochtitlan once stood. I try to remember how to pronounce that one. Street vendors catered to students after class, selling tacos, carnitas, churros, and helado to young couples. Ice cream. When concerts and plays weren't taking in the crowds, protests, debates, and even riots would overtake the streets, calling for social justice on one thing or another. This would be Frida's first taste of campus life.
Cool.
Yeah. So, like, she's going to Hogwarts, right? But Hogwarts is much more political, and Mexican people are shooting pistols at each other.
All I know is you had me at carnitas.
Carnitas. Yeah, dude. I mean, the way that Herrera describes like what's around the preparatoria is like, man, I want to go there. Like, I want to go hang out after school and eat ice cream with my friends and debate politics. That sounds great. That sounds exactly like what I would do. So, at only 14 years old, there's no doubt that Frida felt nervous on her first day there. Going to the preparatoria meant that you would not only learn from the premier thinkers of Mexico, but your classmates would be the future of the new government. And her first impressions weren't great.
And quick age check?
14.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. If you were a Mexican schoolboy standing outside before class started, you might find Frida to be a bit of a strange sight. Despite the lack of uniform requirements, Frida, now 14 and pretty lanky, dressed like she was going to a German prep school, with a stuffy-looking blue shirt and stockings and a black straw hat. Her hair was cut into a flapper-style bob that she could never manage to straighten out, and she had a polarizing effect which would follow her for her life. So some people would be like, wow, she's like kind of cute. She's like interesting. And then other people would be like, que tan fea. Like that's an ugly kid. Like you don't really know what to make of her. And it's also funny that she's dressed up like a German schoolgirl because her dad's German. She's like, this is what you will wear. We are going to the university. I will not have you looking like a fool.
I'm imagining, if you've ever seen The Sound of Music, I'm imagining how Fräulein Maria shows up the first day to be a governess and like the big old hat and the very specific like
yes
everything, you know?
Because like, you know, there's no uniform. You don't have to dress like that. And she's like, I know.
Also,
and she's like trying to do the flapper hair, but her hair's too curly to do it. It's very like teenage, just trying to express yourself when you cannot do that.
I'm also very curious that all along the way so far, nobody was like, here's some tweezers.
You know what? I don't even know, 300 pages into this book, and we have barely talked about the unibrow. I don't know what the deal is with the unibrow.
I mean, hey, look, I'm not trying to knock. Okay, because...
But you'd think there would be some sort of explanation for it, but I guess at the time it wasn't a big deal? I don't know.
Well, I think that's... Well, it's strange, though, because I know that in the 20s, at least in America and in film and everything like that, they were getting into the plucking your eyebrows or even just shaving them off completely and then putting a pencil drawing in over the top of them.
Kincaid Gillette was like, women shouldn't have hair. Women are basically a different species than men.
Pretty much.
We have to make them look distinct.
But I do know that obviously for a long period of time, for most cultures in the world, plucking eyebrows and stuff like that was just not really a thing. Yeah. So I do wonder if there was just an element of like, no, these are just my eyebrows. This is how it works, you know? And as a boy, I had a unibrow too, so I can empathize.
I have a cousin with a unibrow, and he refuses to shave it.
You know, hey.
He's like 35 now.
If you're happy and you own it, who am I? Don't care. You know what I mean? Like,
I guess that's true.
Live your life and be happy. Like, I don't want to be here to judge you, right? Like, if you
Inside
like
me
your
are
unibrow,
two wolves, a complete hater and somebody who just wants everyone to feel joy, and they're always fighting.
I think that's pretty damn accurate because I always think of, I never even saw the movie, but there's this animated movie back in the 2000s with Adam Sandler. It's called 8 Crazy Nights. It's all about Hanukkah. And
I've recently watched that, and I think it's a terrible movie, but that might be an office hours discussion.
Yeah, we can leave it off. But all I remember is from the trailer of it, there's a point where like his grandma or something is shaving her eyebrow, and she goes, "Nobody needs a unibrow." I've always remembered that one little moment.
Yeah, so some thought that she was ugly, while some would admire her pouty looks, and even more would be just simply intrigued by how odd she was. She carried a large boy's backpack that contained her father's books and her notes, along with butterflies, pressed flowers, and anything else she found of interest during her long commutes to and from home. Looks, however, were never something that concerned her, at least not in the same way as other girls. As I mentioned before, the Preparatoria had only recently allowed women to enroll, and out of 2,000 students there, Frida was only one of 35 female students in the entire school. Right? That's like 1%.
I almost feel like, weirdly, that would make her more attractive Because now it's just a numbers game.
There is that appeal, and we talk about that a little bit later. There is that appeal, but she's just not that she's not that person, right? You know, most of the girls stuck together, gathering at the top floor between... Let's try that again. Most of the girls stuck together, gathering at the top floor between classes, but she didn't take well to socializing, and she complained that the other girls were vulgar, corny, and too petty for her taste, often calling them escuinclas, which is a Mexican word for an annoying little dog.
Escuinclas?
I don't want to hang out with those escuinclas.
I mean, it's a fun word. I like it.
That is fun. I don't think that's part of, because, you know, my family's not Mexican. I've never heard that outside of Mexican vernacular. I'm not sure if that's true, but...
And I'm sure we'll get into this a lot more as we go on, but I'm definitely getting queer vibes off of Frida.
Yes, very much so. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. Like all high schools, La Preparatoria had their cliques, but instead of jocks and theater geeks sharing a lunch table, most kids separated themselves culturally and politically. Frida had friends amongst all of them, however. Her friend Sal Novo hung out with the Contemporáneos, a group of old money avant-garde kids who were accused to be Eurocentrists. Her friend Salvador Azuela would become a famous historian of the revolution, and he hung out with the Maestros, a group of kids who were big supporters of President Obregón. Frida's clique, however, were Las Cachuchas.
That's a fun word, too.
Right? The Cachuchas, named after the hats that they all wore, were a group of 7 boys and 2 girls, and they were the rebels in school. They were sharp of wit, well-read, and always causing a scene. Their political views were anything that was groundbreaking and new, and no one was progressive enough to avoid their wrath. The Cachuchas would hang out at the Ibero-American Library, kind of using it as a headquarters. Here they studied, talked, fell in love, broke up, and fought together. The thing that the Cachuchas relished most was their pranks, which ranged from bizarre to downright dangerous. One time, as a kind of protest, their classroom was left screaming and running as they strapped Roman candles to the side of a street dog and sent him down the main hall, shooting fireworks into the classroom.
All I can think of was like, that poor dog. He was probably so scared.
I told Shalana that, and that's exactly what she said.
He was probably like, what are you doing to me?
I want to say that the dog wasn't hurt, but there is no evidence to suggest that he was not blown up in the attack.
Also,
in another...
do we know what... what is it? Cachuchas or cascuchas?
Cachucha.
Cachucha.
A cachucha is like a... It's like a little brimmed hat.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, sorry. You said that, and I was like, wait, what was it again?
Yeah, in another prank, students jumped out of their desks as a full-grown donkey started knocking down tables. Their worst, however, would involve one of Mexico's most important minds at the time. Their philosophy professor, Antonio Caso, the same man who told them, quote, "Turn your eyes to the soil of Mexico," was deemed too boring. Frida told her fellow Cachucha Linda, quote, "We can't take it anymore. He talks and talks very beautifully, but without substance. We've had enough of Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Bergen, and Comte, and he doesn't care to get mixed up with Hegel, Marx, and Engels. Something must be done." Which is like, yeah, that's a complaint I had when I was a teenager.
I also like that your Mexican accent is basically like an East LA.
That's true. I'm like, and honestly, it's just from me going between Spanish and English words. I'm not even trying to do an accent. It's just like my wires are getting crossed.
Have you ever seen
other
Stand
listeners?
and Deliver?
I am only like 1/4 bilingual. Spanish was my first language, and then I lost it as I got older. And both of my parents are Spanish teachers, but so my wires are all crossed with languages.
Have you seen Stand and Deliver? Mm-mm. Oh, you got to, dude. Your parents. If I said, Akiva hasn't seen Stand and Deliver, they'd be like, we're watching it tonight. It's wonderful. But it's about this guy, I think he's initially from Peru, who goes into East LA, teaches math, and he turns all these like basically gangster kids into math geniuses. And it's a true story.
That sounds familiar.
It's really, really good. But in it, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the main actor off the top of my head, which is going to kill me too. He does that exact accent. He does that exact accent. And I always remember there's this one kid in the classroom who he teaches to multiply his 9s with his fingers. Because if you go like 9 times 3, 1, 2, 3, it's 2 and then 7. And that's how you can do it or whatever, right? And so he calls him Fingerman. He goes, "Hey, Fingerman." And just how you were reading that was, I was like, oh my God, that's him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, the Cachuchas were like about to throw a prank on the biggest, most amazing professor in their school, right? They were like, he's too boring. He doesn't talk about Marx and Engels. And, you know, Frida, who was only a young teen at the time, had become a bit of a devout reader of these quote unquote radical philosophers. At a time when Mexicans had been freeing themselves of hacienda owners who owned 90% of the country, there's no wonder that the ideals of these three titans would play a major role in Frida's ideology. So to prepare for their role in her future, I'll give a little microbio of each one of her favorite philosophers, which kind of wraps into her ideals later on.
Cool.
Hegel is the most tame and perhaps the unknown of the three, and he might possibly be the one who's at fault for that himself. George Friedrich Hegel, born in 1770, would become the head of the University of Berlin. He would publish some famously important and gigantic texts such as The Phenomenology of Spirit, The Science of Logic, and The Elements of the Philosophy of Right. These, weirdly enough, at 14 were like Frida's favorite books. People said that she used to read them like comic strips. Not me. You know, I was smart adjacent, but that wasn't me as a kid. Right?
I knew kids like that, though. I think everybody knew kids like that. And I think most of the time in our generation, at least my generation, I'm 10 years older than you are, it was, they didn't even really like it themselves, but they liked other people to think that they liked it.
Yes.
You know, so they're, you know, walking around reading like
Frida's enough
Nietzsche
of an oddball that
something.
I believe that she likes it.
I agree.
But I do know those kids.
Yes.
Like, I do know exactly who you're talking about.
Yes.
Right? We've talked about this before in other episodes, but it's like, I'm too socially aware to be a total dork, but I'm not socially adept enough to be considered a normal child when I was in high school by any stretch of the imagination. So anyway, Hegel, his biggest downfall was his inability to distill his ideas into simpler, shorter language to be understood by all, which in a way speaks to how good of a reader Frida was even as a girl. While I can't say for certain, some ideals that would have made Hegel attractive to Frida was the belief that progress was a brutal pendulum, swinging between opposite ideals, going from problem to overcorrection to solution, which he called the dialectic. In her own experience, that's exactly what the Mexican government was doing, replacing their dictators to freedom fighters and eventually a stable democracy for the most part. She would also have loved his idea that art had a deep purpose and that it wasn't simply for the sake of pretty pictures. Hegel believed that while understanding the facts of an issue, such as reading about a war, was an important step, art was, quote, the sensuous presentation of ideas that could motivate someone to become stronger in their belief and action. Hegel's work on the dialectic would be expounded upon by possibly one of Frida's biggest idols, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Those two would set the groundworks of the most important, if not successful, movements since democracy spread its wings in the 1700s. That statement might be uncomfortable for most, since the enactment of these two philosophers' ideals would lead to some of the worst living conditions in modern history, ones that even my own family would experience in Cuba. But nonetheless, it's important to recognize Marx and Engels as expert diagnosticians for the struggles that Frida and the world at large had been experiencing, even if the two couldn't enact a super viable solution. Right? Yes. Both born in Germany during the 1800s, Marx and Engels would become some of the most important critics of capitalism. While Frida was in La Preparatoria, she would have likely read the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, the two big books, right? There would hardly be a thing Marx wrote about that she would find as untrue. Besides Frida's long-lived distaste for industrialization, she loved that Marx and Engels believed that a worker deserved to see themselves in their work, not as just some cog in an unknowing machine, wondering what the point was for their labor. Frida would have known from her own experience that capitalism could lead to financial insecurity, not by the risk of a lack of resources, but by the poor distribution of the ones they already had. We talked about this in Pancho. What was it, like 90% of all land in Mexico was owned by like 10% of the population. So reading somebody like Marx would have been profound. It
actually got even worse than that. I want to say that it was less than 5% was owned independently by the non-ultra wealthy. There were people that literally owned 1 million acres of land in different parts of Mexico.
And most of them were not even Mexican. They were from other countries too.
And
so it's not that they didn't have resources and that's why the people of Mexico were starving, it's that they weren't distributed well, right? And that was Marx's whole thing.
And if you remember too, and I can only imagine that this was a huge part of it too, especially in the mind of Frida, was that things like trees and water were considered for forever in Mexico. They were just for the people. That everybody had access to trees. Everybody had access
own
to
a river. That's
and,
like owning the air.
Exactly. And then these giant landowners came in and basically put fences up everywhere and were like, those are now our trees. You can't have them. So you now you have to pay for the trees to build your own houses and, stay warm at night and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I can only imagine that people like Frida were sitting there going, this is bullshit. Like, how is that fair? Like,
Yeah. So, Frida saw with her own eyes that profits and properties were kept by the wealthiest with the goal of giving workers as little as they could, proving Marx's theory of primitive accumulation. At a time when the people of Mexico truly felt they were taking the means of production into their own hands, she would have staunchly defended the ideals of Marx and Engels. Before she turned 20, Frida Kahlo would consider herself a communist through and through, especially inspired by the Russian Revolution, which started in 1917, where our friend of Mabel Dodge would also be taking up arms, apparently.
yeah, I want to say it was with the Red Guard, John Reed fought. Anyway.
That's wild.
Yeah.
An adult Frida would find herself risking a bullet for the cause, but for now, she was risking suspension in an attempt to rebel against her professor. Anyway, the Cachuchas wanted to use one of their fireworks, but they knew that after the stunt with the dog, the culprit would be expelled immediately, so they needed to play it safe. They decided to buy a gigantic 6-inch firecracker and make a 20-minute fuse, placing it outside the window above the pulpit where Caso would stand so no one could hear or see it burning. After a coin toss, one of them would light it before the speech commenced. As Caso waxed poetically about the beautiful roots of Mexican people, the tension amongst the Cachuchas built higher and higher. When the fuse burnt out, the troublemakers got a bit more of an explosion than they had expected. Oh, no. The firecracker destroyed all of the adjacent windows in the building, throwing shattered glass and gravel all across Caso.
Oh my gosh.
They were trying to startle him with a big bang sound, and then they just ended up exploding the windows.
It was like a legitimate explosion. Oh my gosh.
And people were ducking. Gravel was flying everywhere. But what's so funny, to give you an example of how much of a problem Frida and the Cachuchas were, without waiting a beat, their professor just stood up, fixed his hair, and continued his speech as if nothing had happened.
I mean, that's pretty metal. I'm not going to lie, though, that if I was one of the students there, I would have been one of the ones going who the fuck did this? I was so scared of what just happened. I peed a little bit. You know what I mean?
And I don't know Caso's history, but I'm imagining he at some point participated in the Mexican Revolution. So he was probably bomb went off.
That's true.
And Frida was like, damn it.
Did you say where this school was?
La Preparatoria was in Mexico City.
It was in Mexico City. So almost definitely then that guy, because if you remember, there was a whole point where Mexico City was under siege. And there was all kinds of bombardments and explosions and everything like that. So I'd be willing to bet if that guy was anywhere around there, he was like, yeah, I've heard cannon fire before. I know how it goes.
It was oh man, the 10th time glass is shattered across my body. So they did not get the satisfaction, unfortunately. But Frida's inclination for pranks went beyond the classroom. In fact, no one was safe. At the Bolivar Amphitheater, at the Bolivar Amphitheater, painters were commissioned to make murals on the roof of the walls in the buildings. Having made wooden scaffolds, the artists would be laying on their backs as Frida and her friends would set fire to the scrap wood below, laughing as they struggled to get down and put out the flames.
Dude! Very uncool.
It got to a point, I didn't add this, I don't think, but it got to a point where the painters would start carrying guns because Frida and all of her friends were trying to set fire to the scaffolds.
Dude, that's
so these guys
demonic,
are I'm going to
man.
shoot this kid.
Dude, if I was up on the top of a tall scaffolding, just trying to paint, by the way, and then somebody lit a fire at the bottom of it where I was afraid that the whole thing was going to collapse and I was going to either die or become paralyzed or whatever, yeah, I'm getting a gun too. Well, I don't know if that's true because I'm not a gun person, but I get the urge.
I understand the sentiment. It's also just like she is poking a bear because all of the adults in her life participated in the war, like
seriously.
One of the artists was of particular interest to a teenage Frida. Unlike the others, who wore crisp black suits, this one was quite portly, with baggy overalls, a Stetson hat, and big black mining boots. The heft, lumbering appearance of this painter inspired Frida to steal his lunch, but out of her chagrin, he never reacted. The next day, she thought it would be funny to watch the big man topple down the stairs, so she rubbed soap across each step into the auditorium. Watching anxiously, she was disappointed again, since he naturally walked so slowly that he didn't miss a step. Little did she know that the painter who had been the subject of her pranks, a Mr. Diego Rivera, would be her future husband.
Oh, creepy. How much older was he?
Way older, and we'll get into it. They did not, apparently, according to all the research that I have, did not know each other romantically until she was around 20. But still a big enough age gap for it to be mad gross. And we'll talk about that more in episode 2.
Yeah, I also am like, Frida, you're not winning any points for me for the beginning part of your life here because you're like disrupting speeches. You're picking on the fat guy. That's about as low as it gets, dude.
When you realize which fat guy we're talking about, you'll be like, no, he deserved to be pranked. But I understand your sentiment.
But wait, okay, yeah, well, you have to get into it. I'm like, because they fall in love, why does he deserve it? Anyway.
I love how you don't. I'm like, it's like Princess Bride right now.
You're the grandpa, I'm the child.
Just hold on a second. As an aside, Professor Kahlo, the one who got blown up, would in fact tumble down the soapy stairs the next day.
Damn.
So she's like, damn, I didn't get him. And Kahlo was like, well, I got to go pick something up from there. Whoa!
I love how her idea of a prank is apparently causing egregious bodily harm and potential paralysis. It's like, you can't walk anymore.
She had a really, really dark sense of humor. And I think, once again, product of the times. You got to remember what just happened in Mexico. Jokes are going to be a little spicier after everybody just got blown up. While it's common lore that Frida fell in love with Rivera while he was painting the mural at his school, there isn't much evidence to support that. Besides pranking him, Rivera only recalls her sitting to watch him paint for a few hours. And I think at that time he actually mentions that she pissed off his current wife because his current wife was just like mad that this kid was following him around all day. But that's about the extent of it, as far as we know.
Okay.
Instead, she had her eyes set on a different lover, a young man named Alejandro Gomez Arias. Handsome, smart, adventurous, and an excellent speaker, Ale Gomez was everything Frida could have wanted. Considered a leader in the Cachuchas, he was different from the rest of the group. While he wasn't opposed to causing a scene, Alejandro wanted to use their demonstrations to enact real change. Hanging out at the library, Alejandro would recite stories to his group, his arms waving like he was conducting some invisible orchestra, and Frida was entranced by his skills as a speaker. As Frida turned 16 in the summer of 1923, the two were each other's novio y novia, which meant that they had promised to marry each other. But their nightly visits to the library would be cut short in November when a rebellion against President Obregón broke out. Over the course of 5 months, 7,000 conservative rioters were killed in an attempt to overthrow the government once again. But Frida saw the revolt through the lens of a teenage girl writing to her novio Alejandro, quote, "Alex, I'm very sorry that yesterday I didn't go to the university, but my mother wouldn't let me go because they told her that there was Ebola. What's more, I didn't even get to register for the next term, and now I don't know what to do." She's like, sorry, 7,000 people blew up, but now I can't even go to school. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell her that I have an exam in modeling, and I'll spend the whole day in Mexico City. It's not very certain since I have to see what humor my mamacita is in, and after that, I'll decide to tell this lie. Even if we're going to see each other, I don't want you to not write to me. If you have nothing to tell me, send 2 blank papers and tell me the same thing 50 times, for that will show me that you at least remember me. Which is very like teenage girl or just teenager in general being like, tell me you love me. I can't even go to school because they're blowing it up.
So for a timeline check, are we right around what, like 1918, 20? Oh, we're in 23. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I think we're almost if I'm not mistaken, I think Poncho's
towards the end
dead
of
by
Poncho.
now.
Yeah.
I think he died in
So,
like 22, 23.
a bunch of conservatives tried to storm the Capitol and take out Obregón. Didn't work out, but it did delay. Worst of all, it did delay Frida from being able to see her boyfriend for a couple weeks. Fortunately for us, Alejandro Arias, who went on to become a professional orator, kept all of Frida's letters. Far from the bold woman we'll see later in her life, her letters show how insecure and madly in love she was with her first boyfriend. Some of her first drawings in the historical record are also here, since Frida was known to doodle little flapper girls, crying faces, and little self-portraits in the margins. Wow. But despite the sweetness of her letters, these two lovebirds weren't immune to the drama of a teenage relationship. In 1925, when Frida was 18, money had begun to dry up at La Casa Azul, and as a result, Frida had to find a job. It wasn't also bad, considering that it was an excuse to get out of the house, and one of her first jobs was to work at the Ministry of Education libraries, but that came to an abrupt stop when Frida found herself in a scandal.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
Uh-huh.
Oh, no. I'm like...
It's not Diego yet. It's not the old... It's going to happen. The train wreck will arrive. Foreshadowing. But not yet. According to Alejandro Arias, one of the women who Frida met with during her interview became enamored with her, and possibly at the library itself, Frida found herself getting intimate with a woman for what seems like the very first time. In fact, Frida was a bit of a player, treating her novio almost as if she were the man in the relationship, and he was one of the side pieces. In a later argument, Frida writes, quote, "Although I have said I love you to many, and I have had many dates and kissed others, underneath it all, I've never loved anyone but you."
Oh, wow. Very high school.
Come on, baby. That was just like one time. You're the only person I actually love.
You know I only love you. I only got eyes for you, babe. Come on. And it goes to show you, kids, doesn't matter if you got a unibrow. If you're kind of intriguing, you got a good personality, don't even matter. Player. You can be a player, for sure.
You can be a player. And don't let gender stop you either. You could be a fuckboy as a woman.
Hey,
you can do that.
You can, whatever tickles your pickle.
Yeah, I was talking about this with Gavi as I was reading, where I was like, wow, like Frida like messes with her like lovers in her life the way that a dude does, right? Like it's very like, come on, babe, it was just one time. You're being crazy.
Tomboy in more ways than one,
Yeah. So as Alejandro Arias explains it, quote, "Frida was quite sexually precocious. To her, sex was a form of enjoying life, a kind of vital impulse. For Frida, that vital impulse wouldn't be confined to men alone, and she would continue to dabble in bisexuality for the rest of her life." Anyway, Alejandro and Frida had begun to pick up the pieces of their relationship in September of 1925. Frida was still desperately in love with her novio, but Alejandro became insecure about the nature of their relationship, worried that Frida had become, quote-unquote, easy with all of her sexual escapades. Nonetheless, they would go out together, exploring the winding streets of Mexico City. On the 17th, the two would chase after a bus headed towards school, hopping onto it as it was moving, just for the fun of it. Sitting in the bus with Frida, Alejandro would watch on in horror as the next few moments burned into his memory. The bus they had hopped on had cut off a trolley car in traffic, and when it did, the trolley was unable to slow down. With a sickening slowness, the trolley car crunched into the side of the bus, eventually driving them into a wall and crushing the passenger side. While Alejandro would wake up from the crash with nothing but bruises, Frida wasn't so lucky.
Oh, God.
Alejandro found his little novia lying on her side with her legs crushed and a jagged steel rod pierced through her abdomen. Oh. And that is where we will pick up in the next episode of Frida Kahlo.
Oh, I feel like we're just getting cooking.
Do you like how I led you on there? I was like, boyfriend and girlfriend hanging on a bus, car crash.
It's a good cliffhanger.
But yeah,
I gotta say, starting off so far with Frida, not the biggest fan.
A
little shit.
She is kind of a little shit. But she is also sweet. Like, she's very sweet to her friends. She's very staunch in her ideals. She cares about the future of Mexico as a whole. But because of a lot of the stuff that she dealt with as a kid, she grew a very thick skin and kind of became a little bit of a dick because of it. Granted, you could say who is the dick first, her circumstances or her. That's for the listeners to decide.
I mean, I gotta say, strapping Roman candles to a dog, destroying all the windows with a massive firecracker, almost killing your professor, and then you get your legs crushed a little bit. Maybe a little bit of universal karma. Just
that is a crazy take. That is a crazy take. Once we finish this, you're gonna be like, well, I don't know what you'll be like. Actually, I don't know. But
I'm mostly
we'll see how that
joking.
plays out.
Come on, give me a break. I get it. Kids can be stupid. Don't get too mad at me, everybody. I'm just saying it's one of those that I go like,
she was an asshole.
Dude, that is an asshole move.
When I first started, so like I said, I was not the one who picked the series. My sister picked it. She really wanted me to do this. And when I first started the series, I had to sit down and write why I didn't like Frida. And I wrote I might even read it during office hours or maybe at the end of the series. And it helped me make a full circle moment about her life. But I had to let it out because I was like, this kid is kind of a jerk as a kid. And then her art is really hard to look at. It's very intense and sometimes violent. And even when it's not violent, it's very weird. Right. But she was an incredibly authentic person who cared very deeply for her friends, who struggled intensely and fought against the struggle with the violence, the intensity of a warrior, right? She was giving the middle finger to death for 50 years. She was, and as you can see with this accident, this is going to have repercussions for the rest of her life, and really change her perspective on a lot of things. But I understand. Like I said, I had to write a whole page about this is why I don't like Frida Kahlo. And then I read it to my sister and she was like, yeah, but look at the opposite of this. Look at how vivacious she was. Look at how in a world where demure women were the only thing that was acceptable, especially in a place like a post-war, as you can see, very conservative uprising sort of Mexico. She was being as authentic as a modern person would be now. And I think that's very interesting, if not likable. So I'll challenge you to maybe not like her, but to just realize how interesting she is considering her surroundings.
Hey, fair. But even if this was the story of Frido, the man, I'd be like, Frida was a dick as a kid.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd be having the same conversation of but look at how vivacious he was. I'd be like, I don't care.
That's true.
If it was a boy that strapped Roman candles to a dog or let a donkey
I'm
loose,
gonna smack the shit out of this little kid.
This little douche needs a smack.
That's such a funny take.
I'm just saying.
Oh my god.
And look, we're making jokes here. I know she's a significant artist, and I want to see where it all goes and everything like that. Because kids do stupid things. All kids do stupid things. So I'm
but
just
first
curious
impressions, she is she's violent,
she's
bro.
a little demon, dude.
Her pranks aren't oh, I drew a mustache while you were sleeping. It's I'm gonna blow you up.
Right.
That's why I'm not sure if you caught it, but in the intro, I said that she was feral, and that's been the best descriptor that I've had for Frida as a person is that she is a feral creature.
I very much understand that and get that impression. Because it's sort of I've been rewatching recently Parks and Recreation, and there's a whole point where when Adam Scott's character, he becomes the boss of everybody, some of the other people throw a prank on him. They make him think he's getting arrested by these cops, and it's all a big prank. And then he doesn't know how to prank back. He's not good at pranks. So the one that he comes up with is that he's going to have these coworkers under them fake get abducted, fake get interrogated, and then ultimately he was going to try to go in and save them, and they were going to shoot him, and blood was going to spurt out of his chest, and they were all just
oh yes,
that was the prank that you were thinking up. That's Frida to me.
Well, okay, like I said, post-war, a prank's gotta have some zing to it. A silly mustache is not gonna get all of these ex-Poncho veterans laughing, right? But a dog dog with fireworks might get some of these rough and ready professors of hers to actually realize how crazy it is. And like, could I call it? They are pranks, but they're also demonstrations. Like I said, these kids were like 100 times more politically active than like the high schoolers that we would have in America today, right? They have so much to protest for. So like, by any means necessary, we're throwing donkeys into the school. We're shooting off firecrackers. We're soaping the stairs.
But I guess that's like where I get confused about it, where I'm like, okay, you put Roman candles onto a dog and then set him through the thing. Sorry, what's the message here? Our message is fuck the man. Like, what? Like,
isn't that so teenage, though? Isn't that so teenager?
That's where you're losing me.
Graffitiing something about a political conflict halfway across the world at your high school, and you're like, okay.
That I would get, because at least the message is clear. It's like, we're going to set loose a donkey into the classroom because donkeys represent capitalism and chairs represent freedom and chains, and so we're gonna set the donkey. You're like, wait, what? Who?
That's so funny. I didn't even think about that. This is why I love reading my scripts to you, because I just love hearing the takes where you're like, no, wait, that's stupid. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
No, trust me, high schoolers are stupid. And that's part of what's funny about this situation is it's like, I think I would imagine anyways, I would hope that when Frida's 30, she went, I don't know what we were thinking with the whole dog and the donkey and the, like, I don't know. Hope, but I get the impression that she was like, no, we were raising a fist of freedom. Like,
or she was laughing, drinking tequila.
So.
Like, that was hilarious.
Something.
That's so funny.
Anyways, well, great start so far and illuminating for me. I mean, again, I had no frame of reference.
They do not cover this in the movie for anybody who's watched the movie. They kind of pick up right at the very end of this episode with the crash with Alejandro. But yeah, she was a troublemaker for sure. Her and all of the Cachuchas were like that. So.
I think throughout the entirety of the series, every time we go through one of these, moments or these bits or whatever, I'm gonna continuously think back to how they represent her in Coco. He's like, I will make an avocado, and in the center of the avocado is going to be a little I can't remember how she says it. I want to play the clip, but it's like it'll be filled with little me's and they all like crawl out of the avocado in the center. I'm like, it is a bit of a demented mind, I feel like, that we're getting into here.
If you see her paintings, you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
That's fair. Which, I mean, I feel like I need to look at more of her paintings, but the ones that I've seen, because I think I had sent you that clip a while ago from like Sotheby's, and it was like one of her paintings set the record for most paid for like a female artist's work. Yes. It was like in the $200 million some odd range.
Yeah, there's actually a big controversy right now that all like the majority of her paintings are currently residing in Spain, and she was obviously not about that life. But all of her paintings got sold out and now live in Europe, which is kind of wild.
That is. But I feel like I got to look at more of them because I don't understand them. They never really connected with me. And I'm really hoping that by the end of this series, I can look at her artwork and go, okay.
And honestly, that's kind of my goal too, funny enough, is like, I am relying on the readers to pick up the information that I've laid out for them. And I have imagine that for a good portion of those readers, when they go and look at her work, it's going to resonate with them. It's still, I'm having a hard time resonating with some of the work because, my lived experience is very different for her. A lot of her paintings are about her political turmoil, her trauma, being a woman. And like, I am not living in the Mexican Revolution as a woman who has medical problems, right? But I'm trying to put myself in that position. So I'm hoping that for some of the listeners, that's resonating with you.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, awesome start, dude. And for everybody that's listening, hope you're enjoying the start to this new series as well. We're going to be back here in 2 weeks with part 2. Do you know how many parts you're thinking it's going to be? 4 or 5?
I'm thinking 6 is the max.
Okay.
6 is the max.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Right now, I'm done with part 4 for the writing, and I still got a good bit to go. And normally I'm like, oh yeah, the first 2 episodes are like where the meat happens, and then there's a little bit in episode 3, and then the other 2 sort of wind down. But I just hit this awesome part where she's living in Detroit and interacting with some very highfalutin American icons in a very authentically Frida way, which I love. So there's lots of juicy stuff.
I'm interested and intrigued. I didn't even know she was ever in Detroit.
She lived in America for a while, to her chagrin.
Crazy. Okay, well, cool. Y'all have that to look forward to as well as I do, because I have no idea what this woman did in her entire life. Well, cool. We'll wrap up there, everybody. Thanks so much for listening, as always. Again, if you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or if you just want to say hello, you can shoot us an email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. You can also put a nice little review somewhere if you feel so inclined. Places like Spotify and Apple seem to be best, but wherever you get your podcasts, we're cool with that too.
Yeah. So, for those of you who are new listeners, thanks to Max, I really appreciate y'all coming in. Yeah. And something that we like to mention sometimes is these episodes are not just us picking up from somebody else's book. We're doing lots of research, lots of writing, MLA format. My series or our series tend to take, close to 100 pages by the time we're done with them. So there's a lot of writing. And if you think that there's any value in this, then we'd love your support on Patreon or even just a comment.
Yeah, you do double-spaced and wide fonts, and I do single-spaced and small fonts.
I do what's official. All right?
I do 12-point in specifically Scala Sans Pro, which I think is an easy read of font.
I do 16-point in Papyrus. No, I'm kidding.
I was about to say, wait, do you really? But I do single-spaced.
I just think it has a certain mystique.
and I did count, I looked up the page count when I did for the Mark Twain series, and it was 68 pages. Single-spaced, 12-point font, which I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, that's like 130 MLA.
That's a lot of pages.
It's crazy.
But anyhow, yeah, we do appreciate your support, everybody. This does take quite a lot of work, but we just love it. So, full steam ahead. And again, if you came to us from Tasting History, we appreciate you being here too. And a special shout out to Max, who is currently, I think he's in Egypt now. When I texted him like a week ago, he was in Jordan.
Yeah, he's going on like a full Indiana Jones trip. Right now, I think he's on one of those steamboats, the one with Gal Gadot being like, enough champagne to fill the Nile.
Yeah.
Which... great line, right? Everybody loves that.
And hey, maybe one day, buddy, that'll be us cruising up the Nile with a group of people. That sort of sounds like my nightmare, but anyway. Before we wrap up, is there any updates you want to give us in the world of knives?
Yes. So, for those of you who don't know, I have been making knives for the last, 13 years, and one of my favorite customers is none other than Max Miller. That's how we actually got to know one another. If you've watched some of his episodes, you'll have seen my knife on the channel. It's this big Damascus cleaver-shaped knife with a wrought iron ferrule and ancient bog oak handle. It's been in a couple of the episodes. If you want to get one of your own, go to metalworkbymiola.com. And since we just had this wonderful collaboration with Max, if you use the code tastinghistory at metalworkbymiola.com, you're going to get 15% off any of the knives. I just recently refurbished and finished up a bunch of smaller knives that I had made as examples while teaching at Hardy and Fuller here in Denver, instructing students on how to make their own knives. I make examples alongside with them, and those are going to be on the website. So once again, Tasting History for 15% off any of those on metalworkbymiola.com.
Is there a time limit to that? Is it going to be like a month after when the episode airs?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give it a shot, everybody.
I think Tasting History episode is on the 27th. We'll do that discount.
24th is when it is.
24th.
Yes.
And then we'll do that discount for the 24th of the next month.
Perfect. So. And then for everybody else, if you miss that window, you can still use the code biographers at checkout and you can get 10% off your order. So it's just a nice little extra.
Yeah, which is still a solid chunk of change for some of those bigger knives. So.
It is, because these are all, and for all of our new listeners, if you didn't know this is how Akiva and I initially became friends, is that I was interested in blacksmithing and I started to learn how to make chef's knives, and I loved his work and was like, hey, can you show me how to do that? And then he kind of took me on as like a baby apprentice sort of a thing to at least for the most part learn. I'm definitely not at your level yet, but getting a little bit better over time.
Daniel's made some great stuff though.
And yeah, so that's how we initially became friends. So it takes a really, really long time is where I'm going with this to make what he makes. It's what?
All by hand.
All by hand. What, technically, really, you'd look at it and you'd say it's weeks from forging it all together, grinding it all down, doing the handle shaping, and
heat treating, sculpting, polishing.
Yeah, and they're very, 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 very good. So anyhow, go check out metalworkbymiola.com to see all of Akiva's work. And then if you're in the Denver area, go check out Hardy and Fuller. You can meet the man himself. You can take classes. You can learn how to make your own knife and then talk all things biographers if you so choose. But thanks everybody again so much for listening. And do remember, like always, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I do hope you, like me, have all learned something today.
See ya!
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.